Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Star Wars video. This is going to be my review for Ahsoka Episode 4. So this was a really good episode. It definitely got the series to the kind of midway point. Some of the stuff is definitely in motion now. The idea that the hyperspace ring has activated, Sabine has gone with it, the big kind of cliffhanger ending of Ahsoka in the World Between Worlds, and Anakin is here to talk to her and what's going to happen here. Everything seems to now be building up for an incredible second half of the series. But there was some nice action in this one, some intriguing things, but definitely I think you would say that the first half of Ahsoka is sort of a series defined by stuff has happened in the past, a little while ago, but also like immediately before this that we don't really know about, and we still have a lot of questions about a lot of elements of what's going on here about Baylan, Shin, Ahsoka and Sabine's kind of prior attempt at doing all of this, and does this episode hint at sort of maybe some aspects of why that actually ended. There's a lot that we kind of still need to get into. So the second half of the series, I think, probably needs to be like packed with character stuff. But you sort of wonder how that's necessary. Are they going to have enough time to do all of this stuff? Because we're also expecting the introduction of Thrawn, Ezra. You know, I suppose you have to do more planning around Thrawn's return in terms of like how big of a scope is there in terms of what he has going on in this other galaxy. You have a big Ahsoka character arc, I guess, thing you're going to have to do here with this conversation with Anakin. You definitely have to sort out whatever Sabine's character arc is, because while it was interesting here, it definitely speaks to the idea that Sabine's character arc is a little all over the place, and we're just kind of waiting to see what she's about these days. It's interesting, but it's a little bit kind of just confusing about like where she is. And then, yeah, Baylan and Shin both just, yeah, it's about time we finally get some details about why they're doing what they're doing. There's some vague talks about, okay, the war sort of needs to happen, but we'll gain power in what, like, the war destroys, and then what we create from that destruction. What does he mean by that? But otherwise, like, the actual core of what happens in this episode is pretty simple, and it made sense from where episode 3 ended off. We had landed on the planet, everyone was basically here, we're on the planet, and then the hyperdrive ring above. That's what we're waiting to see what happens. There is a very interesting kind of like initial scene where we get the idea of, you know, what is the plan going into battle here? Can I, you know, trust you going into this, Sabine? Are you going to, you know, be up to standard in all of this? Because if we can't get the map back ourselves, we might have to make the decision so that no one gets to use the map. We might have to destroy it. And you know what that means. Like, basically we prevent a war, but we, in a way, accept Ezra's fate of being lost forever in this other galaxy. Are you okay with that? Because that's, I think, what we need to do. That's basically what Ahsoka asks. And it's really clear that Sabine doesn't really agree with this, and it makes sense, and ultimately Sabine's actions throughout this episode I don't really have a problem with, because I think it's the right time in her arc to do this stuff with, because we don't really have necessarily a super concrete view on where she stands on everything, but this wanting to go after Ezra is the defining part of her characterization at this point, because her being a Jedi feels a little bit like, why? Is it just to have the skills to be able to get Ezra? Is it because you're close with Ahsoka? So the wanting to get Ezra back as like the remaining kind of family member in a way is a really, really interesting dynamic in this. And it makes sense, but they are also leaning into the direction of like, is her being a Jedi apprentice kind of what she needs to do? Because there's that interesting shot in the middle of the fight where they shoot it from like the ground, looking basically straight up at her Mandalorian helmet, which has fallen off in the middle of battle. And it's just, that's in the like foreground, and then in the background it's the fight going on, a lightsaber fight where she's not overly utilizing a lot of her Mandalorian stuff. She uses it when, you know, she's kind of pushed. But for the most part, she's sticking to the training, and it's an interesting one to see where they exactly go with that. But of course, the episode kind of really kicks off when the ship kind of gets attacked by everyone. Ahsoka and Sabine go off, so Huyang kind of fends off some of the other guys. This, you know, causes some of the action to happen, and we end up with basically this 2-on-2 fight before the big stuff happens, and it's Marrok and Shin against Sabine and Ahsoka. So they pair off. It's Ahsoka versus Marrok, and of course, the rematch between Sabine and Shin. So Marrok ends up getting killed in the fight with Ahsoka, probably to be expected, given that they ultimately go with the idea that any speculation about who Marrok actually is underneath the mask, it ended up kind of being pointless, because Ahsoka cuts him down and magic comes out. It's basically Night Sister magic. Now, whether this is just a spell to reanimate a corpse, or the whole time it was just like energy within like a suit of armor type thing, it's kind of a little bit unclear. But either way, the idea is that this was not an important character. It seemed like Shin herself was a little bit surprised to see that this was actually what Marrok, her ally, actually was. So maybe there's a little bit of a tease of like, why wasn't I told this, in a way. That fight I thought was interesting, but I felt that they didn't need to do the whole, like, you know, stand still for a while, do like 5-6 stance changes, and then do the kind of typical, you know, we each kind of charge past each other for the final blow and see who falls. You didn't quite need to do that. I think you could have just had Ahsoka actually beat him with like her technical prowess and just get the winning blow in the middle of a sequence. They did that a little bit too much with some of Ahsoka's fights, doing the sort of very much, you know, samurai sword, you know, lots of stance changes before you actually have action, which they've tended to do with Ahsoka now that she's older. But I do wish they would just focus more on really, really nice choreographed sequences to be where they actually like have the victories take place. Which otherwise, like, I think a lot of the lightsaber fighting in this episode was actually pretty good across all, like, 3 lightsaber fights that we actually got. But with Ahsoka, there was a little bit too much, I would say, downtime of just pause, a couple of different stance changes, and see where we go from there. When I think Ahsoka, you usually associate as being quite a quick fighter, especially Clone Wars era Ahsoka. And I wish we had seen more of that, because it's clear that they can do some very good choreography here. They're just only doing relatively small sequences, and I wish we could see a little bit more stuff that was like the prequels in these lightsaber fights. So Marrok is taken care of, not particularly important. Sabine against Shin is a lot more even this time, but it's kind of clear the idea, you know, it starts off Sabine actually just uses her blasters, then up close she takes out the lightsaber. At this point her helmet comes off, and again they're doing okay, but again Shin has the advantage, eventually kind of disarms Sabine. Sabine stays in the fight a little bit by kind of doing the, like, tries to do a force push. Shin is a little bit like, can she actually do anything? Oh no. Guard down, Mandalorian kind of wrist launcher, that kind of creates a little bit of an opening. And it eventually just forces, like, Shin to be like, kind of don't want to mess around anymore. Smoke bomb, and she runs off to the other battle. Because, of course, once Ahsoka is done with Marrok, she goes straight to the kind of map area to confront Baylan. And so we finally get the meeting of these two characters. And it's certainly interesting. The familiarity between the two is ultimately just that Baylan is a Jedi, former Jedi, so everyone knew Anakin. And he had at least had some interaction with Anakin, where Anakin praised Ahsoka, which is, I suppose, how Baylan is familiar with Ahsoka to a certain degree. But that's about where that kind of mostly went. He did try to taunt Ahsoka a few times during the fight, kind of pointing out that in a way you are going down the wrong path. There's one particular line that I thought was kind of interesting. The idea of like, he said something along the lines of like, everything you do is about or like results in death and destruction. And it's like, what do you mean by that necessarily? Because I don't immediately think like, that's cutting commentary on Ahsoka. It just kind of feels a little bit like, what? He does actually say to her that like, you like abandoned him, like you abandoned the Jedi Order, and in the process kind of abandoned him. Again, he doesn't lean more into that as the fight kind of progresses, because it does become more of this battle in a way around the map artifact. And Ahsoka actually seems to be in control for the most part. Like, it's relatively even, but I think you can tell that like Ahsoka's focus is defending and then also trying to get the map so that, you know, the hyperdrive coordinates can't load in. If she had just directly focused on trying to take him out, I think the implication is there that she probably had the slight advantage when it really came to that. But when she does remove the map, she does pick it up with her hands, it basically like burns her and seems to just like have I guess the energy of it combined with the injury means she's kind of down a hand to use with her lightsaber. And this is where Baylan takes the advantage. And there's an interesting sequence where we do get Shin arriving into their battle, and Ahsoka initially thinks that, wait, does this mean you have killed Sabine? And she's worried, she wants to go and find Sabine, but then Sabine does show up afterwards, and then this is where we get the kind of big kind of moment, of course. Ahsoka does kind of take Shin out of the fight temporarily by like force pushing her against a rock. This allows for Sabine to have her moment where she has the map, and it's basically like, destroy it because we're in a really tough situation, win the day effectively by destroying it, but also, we are resigned to the fact that kind of Ezra will be lost, but Thrawn will also remain lost, and it will prevent this war. And you know that Sabine is not going to make this decision. And I don't think it completely comes across as just, oh, here's a really bad move from Sabine. I think you get it. The emotion from the character, why she hesitates so much. Because, again, her core defining trait is wanting to go after Ezra. So you completely get why she doesn't do it. In the fight, though, the weakened Ahsoka is basically forced off the edge of the cliff. They don't come back to it, but like roughly halfway through the episode, Ahsoka is presumed dead. And this is where obviously the situation for Sabine becomes worse, because it becomes 2-on-1 against her once again. Now, she has a bit of an advantage, having her blaster to this kind of map orb, but she knows she can't do it because she won't get the thing that she kind of wants most. And you get an interesting kind of manipulation scene from Baylan where he turns off the lightsaber and does manage to sort of, read her really, really well about the whole idea of, if you don't destroy it, you will be able to go after Ezra. In fact, you can come with us and I will guarantee that you will see him again. Also, there's a very interesting moment where he does bring up the idea of like, you consider like Ezra to be like the only remaining quote unquote family member left for you, the only like really truly important person left in your life. And the reason that is the case is because your family, your actual family, died on Mandalore. And he says it's like, it's because your master didn't trust you enough to intervene in some way. So is this saying that like their initial master and apprentice stuff potentially ended over disagreements about what should happen when it comes to Sabine wanting to save her parents? And did Ahsoka make a different decision then? Is that what they're talking about here? Because otherwise I was a little bit like, whoa. Was there another part of Ahsoka kind of backstory that I missed here? And again, it's those like one or two little things that Baylan says about Ahsoka in this episode that you're a little bit like, wait, what? Is Ahsoka all about death and destruction? When did Ahsoka, quote unquote, like almost resign Sabine's parents to their deaths? Care to kind of fill me in on this? But again, I think at this point in Sabine's arc, this was the right decision to make. You can be a little frustrated with, you know, the exact details in that, like, she basically made it so that the villain's plot can actually pan out. But because we fundamentally knew so little about like what she's really about and some of this history with these characters, it makes sense that this is what happens here. The characters will develop over the coming episodes, and then they'll come back together, and we'll address kind of what exactly we're going for here. Because again, I don't think we were ever going to make this harsh decision only halfway through the series, before Ezra's ever really truly been brought up as like he's here in the series, before Thrawn's even been introduced. This was always going to happen. And I think this is a more interesting kind of character dynamic where Sabine is going to consider this a moment of weakness, that she allowed her feelings for Ezra to basically put a lot of people at risk here, because the hyperspace ring does activate. They head off, the map coordinates go through, they're going to the other galaxy, and we assume it's an accurate jump. We don't see where they come out, but the idea seems to be that they should be right there. It's just we don't know what they're exactly going to encounter on the other side here. Like, is it just, you know, Thrawn in full survival mode on his ship in the way it was before? Is he on a planet here in this other galaxy? Does he have a fleet ready to go? Or what? Or are we just here to basically get, I guess, Thrawn and Ezra, maybe some other character, aboard the hyperspace ring, immediately head back, and the Imperial remnants, who, of course, the Republic, the politicians, don't think are up to anything, actually have more planned in the background than we thought, awaiting the return of an actual leader like Thrawn. That kind of, I guess, is what seems to be the case. So that's where that kind of side of things ends. We do get a little bit of a plot where Hera does end up going off on her own against orders, and a X-Wing squad, including our everyone's favorite Ranger of the Republic, comes with them. So we get the Ghost, I suppose. That's a big thing. We get to see the Ghost in live action here, as well as the X-Wing squad. They arrive kind of, they're directed to where they need to go by Huyang, and effectively they arrive just a little bit too late. The hyperspace activates and actually kind of goes through the kind of squadron here a little bit, and it causes basically everyone except the main characters effectively to be killed. So our Ranger of the New Republic survives, the Ghost of course survives, but I think the whole rest of the squad does get taken out. Maybe there's one other, I think, ship that might survive, but it's a bit of a mess here what has happened. Like, it is failure basically. Nice scene with Hera's son having a complete, like, I am force sensitive moment of like, I have a bad feeling about this. Clearly, I think the idea, like, he sensed that like people just died there, but also the idea that it is probably a bad thing within the Force that this hyperspace thing has actually gone off like this. So it does speak to like, okay, where's like Hera going next as a character? But I think before we address like what exactly is going to happen next, we do have to cover the final scene here. So Ahsoka having fallen off the cliff, we come to at the end of the episode, we pan out across the kind of ocean. We don't go down and find her there on the bottom of the cliffs. We pan it kind of across the ocean, and then they do it's clearly like a transition that, you know, happens where we go from the ocean into the kind of starfield background of the World Between World. So we don't know exactly how she got here as such. Now, is it because she's had a life and death situation that she's ended up here? But typically in the past, when we've gone in here, it's more kind of a ritual style thing to get here through a specific portal. And they clearly showed us she fell off a cliff face. So there's no obvious maybe suggestion about why she ended up here. So what has happened here? Has Anakin's Force ghost pulled her in here somehow? Is it because Ahsoka is somewhat special as a character? Because again, we do have some of that like weird stuff about the whole owl connection, the fact that, you know, she was quote unquote, depending on what your view on the whole Mortis situation is, was revived using the kind of life force of the daughter, and that whole kind of Force family is a pretty big thing. That's still an aspect to her character there. She has previous history with the World Between Worlds, because that's how she was saved from the rebels kind of incident where she encountered Darth Vader. So again, some explanation is definitely needed here, but she's here. We were expecting something like this to happen, I think, eventually. Just maybe it to not happen in such an almost kind of random way. But she wakes up here, no one is around, and then we get the hello Snips. So we have the Snips nickname come up here. That was really cool. And then I like the shot because it's focused in on her face, and you can tell there's something right behind like her head tail. And she moves slightly out of the way, and you can see it's Anakin. And it's very clearly like it's a Revenge of the Sith, episode 3, Anakin. And it's like Ahsoka's reaction is like, it's like shocked, of course, but like it's kind of happy shocked that like it's him, it's Anakin. Whereas, of course, she primarily, I suppose, last time she encountered him, remembered him as Darth Vader. But this is Anakin before the fall. More in line with her encounter with him in the Clone Wars kind of final arc. So an interesting scene here in terms of like, Anakin also says, what was it? Like, I wasn't expecting you this soon, in a way. So they seem to be teasing it as sort of like a Force ghost type thing of like that Anakin, of course, at this point is dead. He is a Force ghost, and he's not expecting her to join him here in the afterlife just yet. So is that what we're doing here? That because it is a World Between World, the Force ghost is not going to appear as a ghost, but in kind of like full form. And I guess we are going to get some sort of a big character dynamic here between Ahsoka and Anakin. We've needed to address this for quite a while. How does Ahsoka feel about Anakin now after everything that's happened? Because again, it's post episode 6. She's, I suppose, encountered Luke. The timeline on Ahsoka is a bit weird because I'm pretty sure there's a kind of agreement that the Book of Boba Fett sequence takes place after this show. But I forget if... Do Luke and Ahsoka actually directly talk about Anakin? I know she says, like, you're just like him in a way. So it maybe speaks to the fact that she's had some sort of development in the background when it comes to her view on Anakin. But, either way, it's important to address this. The whole situation. How she feels about Anakin, how she feels about his turn to the dark side, becoming Darth Vader, her encounters with him. But also, I think very clearly they're also going to bring up the whole idea of how Ahsoka feels about why she left and her decision to leave, and did that kind of cause this to happen. And I'm guessing it's going to be Anakin kind of making clear that like it wasn't it wasn't your fault that I fell, and that will be a big weight off her shoulders. And maybe we'll get to a point where she asks, like, I have my own apprentice now, I don't know what to do. How did you know what to do with me, type thing? And he might be able to give her some key advice that will help Sabine going forward, or what. They did end with, like, you'll note in the subtitles, it says at the very end of the episode, like, a Vader theme plays. So as they cut away from the scene, they played the Darth Vader music. I don't... Is it like some sort of weird trap where this isn't going to perhaps be the true, honest, maybe character dynamic scene between the two of them that we were expecting? Is it Force Ghost Anakin, or is this like a dark vision of Anakin that's going to more test her in different ways? I took it more as just this is meant to show kind of Ahsoka's doubt about the situation, that from a fan perspective it's a hype moment because it's Ahsoka and Anakin getting a chance to talk again. But from Ahsoka's perspective, this is this character she has very kind of conflicting feelings about. She's happy to see Anakin again, but Anakin was Darth Vader, and that has only happened like somewhat recently, and she has conflicting views. And in a way, live action Ahsoka here is not necessarily 100% the character that we all kind of know and love. So she's clearly affected by this, and we're hoping that this maybe closure surrounding what happens here can get her back to being the character that she was before, and we can see more of like the true elements of Ahsoka maybe come out in all of this. Either way, I am extremely excited to see what they do in the World Between Worlds, because of course you can do flashbacks in here because it's basically a place separate from like time and space. Effectively, it's between life and death. You can just go to a portal and show events from the past. It also, at the end of all of this, it clearly gives you a way to get Ahsoka into the other galaxy if you want to have Ahsoka be on that side of things and not just encounter Thrawn when they come back. She can just go through some sort of a portal and come out like next to Sabine would be the idea. As far as we're aware with regards to how that works. Again, what specifically decides what one of these portals in the World Between Worlds actually goes to is a little unclear. Does it have to be a notable moment of like destiny, or can you just like think about it and it be any particular moment? So I don't think it's too kind of crazy to think that, you know, we could just get a moment where Ahsoka just like pops out of a portal next to Sabine in the middle of like an encounter with Thrawn or encountering Ezra. There's a variety of things that they could do with this, you know, very, very clearly going forward. But again, I think we're at the point now where they need to deliver on these character arcs. Like, I think this needs to be huge for Ahsoka and kind of, you know, show us why the character is acting like this in some of these scenes. What's driving her, addressing some things that we've needed to address for like many, many years. It's been quite a while. We've wanted to know what her thoughts are on a lot of this. We could finally get into it, and that's really good. And then Sabine, it's going to be super interesting if like she does come out of the other side of this portal, they encounter Thrawn, and Ezra like is just there. How does that dynamic go? Because Sabine's going to encounter him feeling like a lot of guilt because she handed the map over to kind of get here and kind of half-sided with the villains to make this happen. Now, given that Ahsoka was quote-unquote dead as far as she was aware, I don't think you can blame her too much for the decision that she made, because otherwise it would have been some sort of a sacrifice play where she would have had to effectively destroy the thing, which would have 99% of the time, I think, got her killed by anyone around her if she did that. So I'm still like I said, it's a bit of a mystery, like the true, like what is Sabine's goal going forward, because there's a lot to address. What happened with Ahsoka in the past? What happened with her family? What are her true feelings like about Ezra and, you know, going forward? And then what does she want to do or be going forward? Like, does she truly want to be a Jedi? Does she just want some of these skills? The whole idea that we explored in the last episode of like, is she force sensitive? Is that something that particularly matters to her? I want to know like what the character is about these days. That's what I'm really after. But yeah, I'm just gonna wrap it up there. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this episode. Where do you think things are going next, especially with the Ahsoka situation? Like, do you think this is just a true, honest, actual kind of Force ghost Anakin basically here is talking to Ahsoka? It's not some sort of a trap or dark vision, or where do you think they're going with that? And then, you know, I think we probably have to assume that Thrawn, at the very least, is probably getting introduced maybe end of the next episode, probably. Because I think the episode 5, the next one, is the Dave Filoni, I think, is a directed or written episode. So it should be pretty hype next time out. So let me know your thoughts, but that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.